This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher, as always, for Breaking Down Security.
I'm here.
Yeah. So last week, that was fun with Bill Gardner. I appreciated him coming onto our little show here and, teaching us a few things and just, basically shooting some bull with us.
Yeah, I know. Always good to have somebody, fellow podcaster.
Yeah.
Come on, tell us how things are shaping up in his world. And, he's well known in the community, a published author, all that good stuff.
Yep. So, he was speaking, and he's also an educator. He's a professor at Marshall University in West Virginia. So I didn't know that. It was the Marshall University. Not like the Ohio State, but it's a pretty well-known university in its own right. So it was nice to have him on. We'll have him back on again when he asks, because I'm sure that he's always doing something, always speaking. So we'll have him on when he's talking about Google dorking or something again. So it is okay. So it is my unfortunate duty to say that I was less right than I wanted to be, and that I wish some of the things that I said that I thought were true were more truer than they should have been. So during
well said.
Well, man, that
way to take it on the chin, man.
Ah, God, I know. I wish it was less falser than it was. So during our antivirus podcast, I said that antivirus catches about 4% of malware, and that is on a good day. And I actually quoted a podcast visitor and guest, Michael Gough, on that. And he was kind enough to write me this missive. I've read War and Peace in less amount of time. I'm just kidding. It's passive aggressive. I shouldn't say that. That's wrong. So he wrote on January 22nd, 4 days ago, he said, "Yo, Mr. Brake, you misquoted me, sir. Please do an errata, as this is flat out an error. You quoted, I said, antivirus catches 4% of malware, and that is on a good day. If you read or listen to what I actually said, he says, quote, of the APT samples we upload to VirusTotal, we only had a detection rate of 4%. The only reason it was this high was due to the payloads we uploaded from the initial phishing emails and exclude those fish, and it was 0%. He goes on to state in the email, so the antivirus industry focuses on 20% of the total numbers above, which he said there's 480 million new total malware detected in 2015, and 140 new malware in 2015. So he said AV focuses on 20% of those total numbers, and summarizing, which is what we see on websites, spam, and phishing campaigns. So of the new APT, aka the new, unknown, and targeted, there's roughly a 4% detection rate, which is generally agreed upon across us professional types. Dave Kennedy said it on TV, so it must be true. So please correct your misquote of what I said, because 4% of all malware is a plain error. Thank you. So that is me being less right than I should be, and I am
apologetic.
Oh, easy. God, no. Well, I will.
You have some apologetic tendencies right now.
I will agree that I was perhaps not as right as I should have been. So, and I am feeling that I probably should be more right in the future. So there we go. All right. So we got that unhappiness past us. Mr. Betcher, what is this week's podcast? What are we going to talk about?
Today's topic is Moxie versus mechanisms. Tools versus talent.
Okay,
People versus machines, right?
so it's not Moxie Marlin Spike versus mechanisms. It's just Moxie.
Just Moxie.
Okay.
Moxie being, what? I need to look
Moxie.
that up. Moxie.
According to Google, when I typed it into the search engine, it is a noun, North American informal, force of character, determination, or nerve. When you've got Moxie, you need the clothes to match. Okay. From the 20th century, proprietary name of a soft drink. Oh, well, okay. There you go. So the idea is...
Nice.
So the idea is that, and we talked about this a little bit with Bill Gardner about the over reliance or the over dependence on tools, or the false promises that some tools, or the false assurances that tools give us. And that's what we're going to be talking about this week.
Okay. Yeah. And I hate to say the false assurances of tools. Assurances of salespeople, right? I mean, I'm sure that these tools do what they say they're advertised to do. It's just that maybe you need the right Moxie behind them.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So we'll start with tools. Why are tools a good thing to have?
Well,
in your profession, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if, most people, when they do anything, they like to automate it. I actually have another Bob story that we'll have. I'll have one coming on later on. But this week we're doing something at the office, and, I was discussing how I do it now, and our new pen test guy, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just write up a Ruby script for that, and we'll be able to automate that process. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's kind of in the hacker ethos or the hacker mindset that, boring, redundant things that we don't want to do manually need some automation. I mean, we're going to script it up. We're going to automate it. We're going to throw something at it that will allow us to just punch in less keystrokes to make a bigger thing happen.
Yeah. Cron is your friend, right?
Cron is your friend, or, bash scripting is your friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a way to automate certain tasks, obviously, and you can do more with less. So you don't have to spend an hour doing this procedure that you have to do every day. You can automate that to do it for you. It may take you a lot less than 10 minutes to do it, or no time at all once the thing gets set up and running. But it probably took a significant investment at first, and then it's gravy after that. You just have to maintain the tool at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And usually they come at a fixed cost. You have your initial cost. Maybe you're buying a license, and that's a known cost. And then then it sits there and runs, for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they have a measurable performance as well, a fixed performance, if you will. When you set up a tool and you start running it, basically how well it's going to do. For example, antivirus catches 4% of APT, right?
I'm not going there.
It's
nope.
known and measurable.
Nope, I'm not going there.
So if your adversary is APT, antivirus is probably not going to be your tool of choice against that.
That's true.
It'll be a shot in the dark, to say the least.
Every tool we have, it's not just something. There are some that are just drop and go, but some of them actually require a little bit of tuning, a little bit of effort, a little bit of knowledge from the person itself to manage it. I mean, you've got IDS and IPS, you've got things like tripwire agents, you've got patching systems, even open source tools like the Chef and the Puppet, and there's another one out there that's similar to Chef and Puppet that I'm forgetting right now, but they all require a little finagling, a little finesse. So the beginning, I mean, there's going to come a point where you're actually going to have a time saver, but the initial cost of time to set up is also a cost. So you have to, you're looking at that. So you have to figure a return on investment. Are you going to spend 3 hours and then you're going to save 30% of your time? Then that's worth doing. If it's going to be something where you set it up and then you have to keep doing stuff on the regular, at some point you might as well just figure out a way to. You may even automate the automation. I don't know.
One thing that I have a pet peeve about, right, is that management will approve this tool, and they get a CapEx for it, right? CapEx is a capital expenditure.
Yeah.
But they don't even consider OpEx in that same vein, which is operational expenditure. So you get a tool and you realize, or you see the cost of that initially and going forward, to tell you the truth, but you don't understand the cost of maintaining it. Setting it up and maintaining it also has a cost. So, part of that, why our tool's a good thing is they're pretty easy to get budget approval for, right? So I've been in a situation where my company would spend, we get approval to spend $150,000 on a particular tool. I mean, like that, it was streamlined. There was no question about it. I mean, you want that, you're good to go. But hiring someone was completely out of the question. We had a hiring freeze. We couldn't hire anybody. You want to spend $150,000 a year on a tool, go for it. But you're not hiring a single person. And so I don't understand why it's so easy to budget for a tool, yet it's nearly impossible to budget for the Moxie to go with it.
Well, yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, because if you have a person who already works there managing the tool, then you don't have additional. There's additional costs. You're talking insurance. You're talking, all the other things that come with it. A tool doesn't need to quit at 3
doesn't have baggage.
It doesn't have baggage. A tool doesn't need to leave at 3 p.m. to go pick their kid up at school, or a tool doesn't get sick. Well, I guess a tool can get sick, but a tool can get sick. But I mean, for the most part, tools get updated, new things happen. I think I remember the tool that you're talking about that cost $150,000. Did it actually end up saving time and money? Because I don't.
That's hard to say, because, I mean, did it save time? Well, I don't think it saved money, and I'm not sure it saved time either, because they weren't willing to invest in putting somebody out there, a couple of days a week, a couple of man days per week to, massage it, finagle it, get it running smooth, or even the initial, because it takes a long time to learn how to work a certain tool, right?
And that's your OpEx, where you're saying, okay, we paid $150,000 on something. If you don't get training for it, the front end time is going to multiply massively, which is why anytime you buy a product from a vendor, you should require a training attachment, regardless of how much it costs, because one, you'll get you're going to get a support contract. So part of the support contract is going to be, you're either going to be sitting on the phone with support trying to walk through proper setup, or you can, take a 3 or 4 day training course and learn how to use it properly. And that will, that 3 or 4 days may be, 30 hours of time wasted according to management. But if it reduces the amount of time and effort your employee is using to run the product, you'll get that 30 hours back eventually in spades. So,
I was working on a tool today, right? It was open source.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk Michael, but I'm sorry. That was.
So I was, trying to get the damn thing installed. And okay, so open source, that's free, right? Okay, there's no cost. But yet, it took me for freaking ever to get the damn thing running. I mean, I had to be a freaking expert Ruby installer.
Oh, God.
Okay? And Okay, so not only you have to install Ruby, but then there's these other packages that you have to install on top of Ruby to get this tool to actually start up and run. And so all this time spent on getting the thing installed, and I haven't even started on learning how to use the tool, right?
Mm.
And even on their website, where it has the installation instructions written out, which is, 2 or 3 pages, not too bad. But it says on there, and I'm quoting, "This is quite painful to install." I'm like, what? What the hell? Are you kidding me? I mean, if you want somebody to use it, make it easy to install, or have a binary that you can just drag and double click or something like that. I mean, come on.
Well,
Are you kidding me?
I mean, you are probably preaching. Somebody out there is listening to this. You're going, I know which one that is,
Yeah.
because they've had to deal with that as well. Poor documentation and that could be a killer with a tool as well. I mean, if you're
Well, the
hoping,
problem was this tool was relying on a bunch of other open source tools
Mm,
to be stable
yeah,
in order to run on top of those.
yeah,
So it was relying on those other things not changing, you
okay.
know?
So that would be a pitfall of having a tool. So, I mean, is there options for that? I mean, could you say, well, okay, we're not going to use this tool because it's just a pain in the ass to set up, because of the documentation? Or, I mean,
Well, then you could say, well, this is a free tool. Maybe your company has a policy against open source,
it's true.
right? That's possible. Like we're in it for the stability. So therefore we need a support contract. And if
Yeah,
there's no support contract for open source, I mean,
yeah,
why would there be? Then, we're just not going to even bother with it. We're going to
yeah.
pay big bucks in CapEx to buy something that is built and supported by an actual company,
hmm Yeah,
because of the stability of that tool and probably the ease of use too.
yeah. Well,
And
there's another pitfall. We were going to talk about some of the pitfalls of tools. One of them being documentation. You got to make sure that it's properly documented, and if it doesn't have a support contract, make sure the tools you're going to be using have support forums or mailing lists, or you can easily get a hold of people who work on the project that through Twitter or something to be able to find out those issues. You might want to move on to another tool, or again, the tool you're using has been updated in 4 years. You may be wanting to look for a different tool because with security vulnerabilities being what they are, you try to upgrade or patch a library on that tool, and the tool you've been using, the open source tool you've been using for years, doesn't work. Now, that's not just for free tools. I mean, I think everybody's got a Java or Oracle story with a database that, there's O-Day all the time on that, or there's, patches that need to be applied. And, um,
yeah,
the documentation really isn't there for a lot of, Oracle stuff, or you've got to have a support contract just to look at the portal with the documentation. So, sometimes it's just a necessary cost of doing business is to have a, crap software application. So
here's a pitfall. A tool is useless without somebody to maintain the tool,
that's right.
right? If you don't have somebody on staff that knows how to use it, how to configure it, how to install it, how to update it, it's useless.
Yeah. Or worse, you've had that guy who's been here for 25 years, knows everything about a system, doesn't share his knowledge, and then he leaves.
And that's the downside of open source tools as well. You get open source tools, it's hard to configure, so you get this guy who knows the thing or is able to set it up and configure it. He does that, but unfortunately, it's kind of like programming in Perl. Only the person who wrote it can read it, or
Well,
worse yet, they'll write it and then 2 years later they can't even understand what they wrote, so they just rewrite it.
yeah.
Things like that. You try to hire a replacement and they have no idea what the guy was doing and can't make heads or tails of his configurations.
Yep.
So that's a downside of open source, right? It's not as easy to configure typically. And we've talked about that before, about the elk stack as well.
Yep. Yeah. So another pitfall of, and this is not number two, not necessarily an open source issue, but salespeople or business development folks. Um, I work at a company that has a very robust and mature sales and BD force, and they are quite adept at doing the things that they do. And
Well said.
I'm one for turning a phrase today, I think. I've had to deal with vendors in the past, and some of them are great and no pressure, and others are like a used car salesman who's trying to get that Fiat, that 95 Fiat off the showroom floor for less than $30,000. So, it's ultimately, I think there's a difference, of course, between salespeople and sales engineers. If you have your choice, always suggest when you're buying something that a sales engineer comes in. They're still getting commissions and stuff for sales, but they can actually speak knowledgeably about a product. That's important, because if you want to ask really technical questions to a sales or BD guy, they're just there for the free lunch or possibly the non-influential dinner that they're going to give you. So always try to find a sales engineer. Always ask for a sales engineer so that they can help you answer those tough questions about what you're doing. The other thing I would suggest is, and this is something that me and Mr. Betcher know a little bit about from our previous companies, always have an idea of what it is you want that tool to do. Because if you want that tool to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't even know why you're buying the tool, but you know you need it because of something, you're going to buy this tool and it's only going to do 40% of what you need, and then you're going to have to go back to them and ask for more things, which is going to cost more money. So it's always helpful to know exactly what you want to accomplish with the tool. If you know it does X, Y, and Z, you're good. But it's all about requirements at that point. I have a requirement to do asset management on my servers. I need it to work on Mac, Linux, and Windows. I need it to be able to work in CentOS, Red Hat. Don't just walk in there and go, hey, I need to be able to look at all the items on my network. I need it, that's, pretty vague, information. So you need to know, I need to be able to monitor infrastructure. I need to be able to watch my Cisco and Palo Alto switches. And the salespeople, they're not really ones to volunteer that kind of stuff, unless you come in with something and they go, oh, well, we've got this little module, but it's going to cost extra. So always when you're talking to salespeople, you need to do some prep before you actually talk to the salespeople. Make sure that you understand what it is you want out of the product. If it even requires you to talk to other people who have that product to see if they like it before you talk to the salespeople, that's something you should do too. Try to engage other companies or other organizations, even if you have to do it on the sly. I know sometimes NDA prohibits that kind of thing, but
yeah, you could probably ask them what are their last 3 customers and their numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if they would. Yeah, I don't know how that works, if they would allow that. I mean, some NDAs are pretty nasty where the company who owns it won't even allow you to share that they own it for security purposes. So yeah, a lot of times when you're buying products, you have to decide on whether or not you want to, be on the website of that company as, hey, we use blah product. So, that's something you can always find out. So, So the third thing is, with tools, you get too comfortable using them. And,
how's that?
What do you mean? Oh, well, I mean, so if you used it for a while, let's say you've got this tool and you've used it for a while and you just assume that it's doing its job.
Set and forget. Like the salesman wants you to believe, set and forget, and
yeah,
you're good, man.
Yeah. And, it gets too comfortable. If it's something that needs to be dialed in or tuned every once in a while, you may forget to do that, or you may just assume that it's good to go. A lot of times those kinds of things are just set and forget. It's because you were trying to satisfy a checkbox. So, you put your WAF in listening mode, you check the box because you've got something, quote unquote, protecting your website. Or, if it didn't find it, we're probably okay. You're assuming that your tool is a catch-all and will protect you indefinitely. But it requires maintenance. So you don't want to get too comfortable just letting your applications or your management or your tools just kind of sitting without being looked at on the reg. Spot checks.
Yeah, contrary to what some believe, new exploits do come out quite often.
Mm-hmm. And bypasses and patching your applications.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about people, right?
All right.
Talked about tools. Let's talk about talent. Why are smart people a good thing? Those people with some security moxie, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, people can learn things. Usually the good ones do. They're versatile. They don't necessarily, they're not stagnant. They don't just sit there. They're available to learn new things constantly. They're, 1 minute they're firewall admin,
Yeah. Versatility, I think that's a good word. People can adjust to changing conditions better. If you buy a tool, it's pretty much stagnant. Okay, whereas people can adapt to new things. And good people can make the most of what tools that you do have available.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So if you if you have an awesome person on staff, they can do a lot with, in the logging realm with grep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They can get on a Linux machine, take care of all the logs on there by just creating some scripts and creating their own alerts that come through. I mean, you may not have to buy Splunk because you've got this awesome, security dude on staff.
Yep.
Who's got everything taken care of.
Yeah. And, talent doesn't think in terms of rule sets or, rigid or broadly defined, suggestions that were created by other things. They're able to think outside the box for the most part. They can do other things. So your WAF can't be, an IDS 1 week or whatever. So 1 week, your firewall guy doing the audits can be doing patch management the next, or, he can be teaching a developer how to not do whatever it is the developer's doing. So, you get more bang for your buck, and the problem with that though is, people who know what their value is, you're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
I got
good people are expensive, right?
Yeah. And I have another Bob story. When we were hiring our new pen tester guy, he wasn't the first person we'd talked to. And by the job description, I asked my boss, I was like, okay, so how much are we wanting to pay the guy based on the job description that we have right now? And he gave me a number, and I was like, you're not going to get that guy for that money. I was like, a guy who knows what it is you want him to know, according to his job description, is going to want about, 50% more than that. And he's like, oh, you think so? And I was like, yeah, I would want 50% more than that. For knowing everything it is that I know. I said, you're going to have to negotiate what, the talent pool is going to look like, or you're going to have to say, that would be a nice to have. But, if he doesn't know this or she doesn't know this, then that's fine. We can, if they can learn that on the fly, then that's great. So, that's one of the pitfalls, I think, to hiring people. I mean, the price of a person who knows things varies wildly depending on where you live, how much experience that person has. Whereas a tool, say I'm gonna throw out a name here. So let's say Nessus. Nessus is going to cost the same in Boston as it is in LA, as it is in Dallas, as it is in Seattle or Miami or Podunk
India.
nowhere, India, yeah, China, whatever. It's going to cost the same. So you get $12,500 worth of X, regardless of where you are. With a pen tester, the prices go up and down, just like the way the tides come in and out. Sometimes you find that one guy who you're going to pay more for. Sometimes you're not going to want to pay as much for the same guy. It just depends on the job market and, where the person lives and the cost of living in that place.
So people have variable performance, right? So tools, they perform a function day in and day out. People, they can do good, or they can perform well some days or with some projects, and other projects they kind of falter. That's same true. Person would.
Yeah, that's true.
You can also get bad hires. You hire the wrong person, it costs you tremendously. I mean, there's nothing worse as a manager that you can do than to hire somebody who's terrible.
Yeah.
Who ends up being terrible, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where the networking thing comes in. I mean, I would want to know something about the person before I hired them that, I don't want to just have, come in blind on something, which is why I always try to do some research on the people that I find. Or that hey, this guy's coming in to interview with us in a couple of days. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Google, I'm on something trying to find out who this guy is, if he actually has a, experience elsewhere. Does he write books? Does he speak? Does he, what does he do in his off time? That kind of stuff. Does he have a Facebook page? And I can find out if he's a total D to work with, because I don't want to work with a total D. A lot of that is, do you want to spend 40 hours a week with that guy? It's not always necessarily talent for me. It's, do I want to work 40 hours a week with that guy? If I can't stand him on Facebook, why would I want to work with him, Or, if I know him from personal experience or something.
Sounds like you got a lot to say on this subject. We might want to do a cast on maintaining a talent pipeline.
That's
something
true.
Like that.
That's true.
That's valuable.
It's weird, but yeah, the last couple of months or so, I've been almost like a recruiter or something, going, hey, I know a guy who's got a thing here, and I'm pushing people back and forth for jobs and positions and stuff. They don't always work out, but I don't get anything out of it. And, the guy's a friend, and I know a guy who needs a job or needs a position filled. So, I just make the hole. But yeah, it's like, you gotta, it's finesse thing. I mean, hiring people these days, it's not just, I'm going to go and log into this HR website and post my resume in Taleo or something and get hired, right? When I look for jobs, as a matter of fact, if Taleo is the HR system that they use, I tend to not apply for that job. But yeah, so yeah, and the other things about Pitfall, people leave.
Yeah. The tool's not going to leave, person will eventually. They're not going to work for you forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that is a topic for a whole other podcast. Why do they leave? Or why do they stay?
Tons of reasons. They got a girl in San Francisco.
Okay,
right?
That's great. But they leave because of the culture of the company. Do they leave because they're not getting enough training? Do they leave because they got in a better job? Are they trying to leave, but just doing that so that you will recognize their talent and give you, get a better pay raise out of it? I mean, do they stay because they're not that skilled, or they have they have self-esteem issues, like they think they can't do anything better, or are they truly happy there? I mean, that's a topic for an entire other podcast.
Okay, sidetrack Jack.
Yeah.
What's the answer then? What's the answer to tools versus talent? I mean, who's the winner?
Well, you wrote down balance. So maybe you could explain balance.
Well, I think in your organization, you have to find that balance between tools and talent. You have to have the right tools to perform the functions that you need to have done. how do you reach that balance? Well, I think it starts with you doing an assessment of the tools that you have versus the things you want to accomplish from a security standpoint. So start with a capability matrix of the tools that you have and find any gaps that are there based on what you want to accomplish, how you want to secure your environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So take all the security aspects. Do you want to have a kick-ass DR,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to be able to detect APT, right? Do you want to be able to defend against a denial of service attack? Those kinds of things, and see what your business is willing to build towards, right? And start there and see if you have the tools that fill those needs. And if you do you have the right amount of talent to make sure that those tools are run adequately? I think that's the answer.
Yeah. And the other thing is I think you should try to automate as much as you can. But I caveat that by making sure that you do proper documentation of that automation and those tools so that you always have a backup. Because I always use the bus reference. Like, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, how am I going to do X? So that's what I tell people. I'm like, okay, so you have this thing, but if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, how am I gonna fix that? And sometimes you get people like, oh, that's not going to happen and whatever. And then, you have to make a concerted effort to understand the system yourself and write down all your little gotchas. So,
and on that note, if you have to get rid of a tool for some reason, let's say the cost is too great,
mm-hmm.
or the company goes out of business. All right, what gaps do you need to fill, and what could you fill them with? Also, do you have any overlap in your tools?
Yep.
Right. So you may be able to stop paying for a particular tool, stop managing a particular tool, because there's other tools that are probably better that cover that gap. And that's why a capability matrix is important.
Yeah. And the other one that we're not hitting on here is sometimes you come into a company and they have a tool that sucks. But they've been using it forever because they think it does something for them. Sometimes a company just needs to call a baby ugly and no longer use that tool. So that's one thing you need to maybe the capability matrix you're talking about would make it more better than make it better than just saying, well, this tool sucks, you should really use this tool. You should be able to go, okay, this tool doesn't do all of these things that this tool does, or this tool is no longer being
okay, Bryan, you saying a tool sucks is your opinion, but you have to be able to back that up with facts.
Exactly.
So that's why the documentation would be important, because nobody's going to listen to you if you say, hey, this tool sucks, we got to get rid of it.
Yeah. Or, it's just there to check a box. And, if we bought this tool, it will check that same box, but also give us these capabilities or give us added functionality.
And again, you have to do that assessment of what you want to protect. And maybe you come up with the boxes that you want to have checked. And does this tool check all those boxes? Or do these suite of tools cover those checks 100%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
so
we are overlooking the third option. Instead of a tool or a person, you could just get a service that will help automate some of your processes. There's security as a service. You've got
outsourcing. Good one.
Well, yeah, outsourcing kind of has a negative connotation, but there are companies out there that will handle your computer stuff. There's companies out there that will handle, doing your backups for you. There's companies out there that'll even do pen testing and security for you without, the need for additional people. Or they'll help you with information or your incident response. They'll do staff augmentation for you during incident response. There's a ton of things out there, and those also come with their own advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the best and worst of both worlds. It's kind of a mesh of tools and talent, right? Mm-hmm. Because, it's sort of like a tool. It's a fixed cost. And it's sort of like talent because they have people behind that.
Yep.
So it's a hodgepodge of those two things, what we've been talking about. So they do have advantages. They have probably more staffing and can accommodate the ebbs and flows of business that you might have. So if you have a need, okay. So if you have a security incident and you have a need for increased staffing at that moment, some of these services have much more staff than you can afford
Yep.
at that time. So it's kind of as a counterweight there.
Yep. And also you have an available talent pool of people that you interact with. And if you bring them in as contractors or something like that, if you think that they're going to do a better job as a corporate employee or a full-time employee, then, you can poach them. So, I mean, you can, a lot of people do that on purpose. I know a rather big software company up here who deals a lot with contractors, and they'll convert people to full-time employees if they enjoy their work and they think they do a great job. So that's another way you can augment your own, Moxie, your own people, your own assets by, test driving people, for instance.
You're talking about the security staffing service, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also the security, like say you want somebody to run your SIEM for you, right? Another company to do that. So they'll have people behind that as well. So some of the, I guess, disadvantages of that would be they don't know your environment as well as somebody that would be on your staff does. You call them and you might get a different person each time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where you have to educate them on what your environment is like. And if you even don't know how your environment works, then they can only get as schooled as much as you know of your own environment.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the poaching people. I want to go back to that for a second. You may go through an audit, and the auditor did such a good job that you decide you're going to need somebody to help you with your compliance measures next year. You may hire that auditor that did your PCI audit to get you ready for next year by helping you at your own company. That's a Bob story that just came up recently ourselves.
Really?
Yeah, we hired an auditor that did an audit for us last year because she did a fantastic job, and we wanted to make sure that we knew all the ins and outs because we didn't have Big Four auditing experience. So we picked her up as a permanent employee, and she's doing great. So. What's this console monkeys? What is that as a disadvantage?
Well, and that kind of goes along with the next one, level 0. Typically, when you call the security as a service vendor, you'll get their first level.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And you pretty much have to deal with them first, and maybe that's fine for a lot of issues, but on some issues you need to escalate, and it takes time to escalate.
Excuse me, did you reboot your box? Because that sometimes fixes it. Did you reboot it?
Really?
Did you reboot it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, and I did X, Y, and Z. Please escalate me to level 3.
Well, no. Okay, wait. Before I can do that, did you type that into the box like I asked you to do? Could you read the output of that for me, please? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets annoying real quick if you have to do that every time. So yeah. And one of the big disadvantages I see is security as a service is they're just another set of eyes, and they may miss things just like you may miss things. I know we advocate using more than one vulnerability scanner on a network because one vulnerability scanner may find different vulnerabilities that the other one may find. My final Bob story of the night, my company does use a company that does web application software and testing, and they constantly scan a website that we have. And I did a scan of that same website with another vulnerability scanner that I have in-house and found a vulnerability that they did not find. And if they're constantly scanning this site, they should find that vulnerability, in my opinion. So you can't always... follow. They're just like a vulnerability scanner. You can't always believe that they are completely right and that there are no vulnerabilities. You either have to do your own manual scanning yourself. So you do have to do spot checks even on things like softwares or, security as a service or infrastructure as a service. You have to make sure, are they patching things if they're managing your servers for you? Are they doing all the necessary security upgrades? Are they maintaining your IDS and IPS stuff? Are they, when was the last time they noticed some odd behavior on the network? You should be creating odd behavior on the network and seeing if they're alerting you to it. If they're not, then why aren't they?
Yeah, that reminds me of when we basically insourced. What was it that we insourced? This was a while back. I think it was IDS.
Mm-hmm.
We had another division of the company that were experts in IDS do that particular job for us.
I remember that.
And at some point, all of a sudden, our report, we would get a weekly report, and then we had the normal traffic on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, it was nothing. And we were like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. So we had to go, and long story short, turns out that the IDS wasn't functioning properly and they didn't have the proper controls on it to alert them to that fact. So they make mistakes too, and we have to trust but verify.
That's true. And, if you have a third party that isn't your company handling that stuff, because we did insource, we didn't have much of a choice on insourcing, but if you have a third party doing that, they need to have some kind of SLA. If they have an outage, if there's an outage, if they can't be monitoring your system 24/7 like they're supposed to, they need to, that needs to be escalated. So, if your tools that you have in-house are busted and your support contract requires them to, depending on how well you paid, if it's 8x5 or 7/24, they should, there should be a minimum time for them to get back to you, because if your tools aren't working, you're missing something in your enterprise. You're missing something in your network. So
yeah, always be testing.
ABT, always be testing. Yeah. Yeah, not APT. Yeah. So what are one of them? What are the takeaways you got from our Moxie versus mechanism? I love that. By the way, you're gonna have to put that on a shirt or something. So we'll have to,
Yeah, I have to find. That's a good slogan, but what's it a slogan for?
Patent pending.
I don't know.
Patent pending.
Yeah.
Patent pending. Patent pending.
Takeaways. So, I think you should find out in your organization what your security bar is. Okay, because security, and I'm using air quotes, is an infinite goal, right? I mean, you can always be more secure, but there comes a point where you're secure enough, okay, for what you're trying to protect. You can set a bar and be realistic with that bar, okay? You can spend, $5,000, $1 million, $10 million. I mean, sky's the limit, because again, security, you can never be 100% secure.
Yeah.
So, and then work towards achieving that bar. Find out what it's going to take to get there. What tools do you need? What kind of people do you need?
Yep.
What kind of outsourcing do you need to have in order to achieve that bar? Yeah. And find out what the best mix is.
Yeah, and I'm just a little bit behind you. I think that you should automate as much as you can, when it makes sense. Something as simple as a batch file may save you, 20 to 30 minutes of time every day. If it's something you can just run from a command line and pull up a fancy report, or pull up information that's important, that saves you some time. And that 20 or 30 minutes while that report is running could be helpful. Automate anything you can, but always distrust your tools. I would almost say distrust your tools. Know that just because it's automated doesn't necessarily mean that it's getting everything properly, and do spot checks to make sure that your tools work. Again, I'm going to go back to networking for your people. Make sure that when you're hiring people, that are going to be working with you, that one, the job descriptions make sense so that you get the right people for the right job, because you don't want to hire somebody that doesn't make any sense.
And remember, if your network is good, if you've got a strong network and you're looking to hire somebody, it could be word of mouth and you found somebody.
Yep.
If you're looking to get a job, you may not even have to apply to a job.
Yep.
All right. Yep. If your network is strong enough, it can be word of mouth. So work on your network.
Yep.
On that note.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Betcher, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss more about Moxie and mechanisms?
Hey, you can just direct message me on Twitter. I'm at BetcherPwned.
Wow. But they have to follow you first. So obviously you want them to follow you and then DM you, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
Right. So I have, for now, I have that setting. If I get overwhelmed, then I might shut it off. But yeah, please follow me. Always appreciate that. And thanks for the follow if you are following me. And, if you have any questions on the topics we talk about, or, my purview now, incident response, security in general, LogMD, whatever, go for it, man. Love talking about those.
Right on. So the official BreakSec podcast is at BreakSec Podcast. Twitter is at BreakSec, BRAKE-SEC. You can find me personally at Bryan Brake, BRYANBRAKE. Let's see. I'm looking at our past show notes because we do put some stuff in the show notes about how you can get a hold of us and listen better. We're on the Stitcher network, so if you're a fan of the Stitcher app, you can download and listen to us there. We're also on the TuneIn Radio app, so if you are using that for internet radio or podcasts or what have you, we're on there. I think we're on the Google Podcast. I think we're in the Google Play Store under the podcasts as well. That's kind of a new thing. I'll have to find the link for that, but we're on Patreon. We believe in the value for value model. So if you find value in what we're doing here, please feel free to, drop a buck or two down there. It goes to, hosting fees. And at the end of the year, anything I have extra, I give to Hackers for Charity. Thank you to our Patreon fans right now. We've got about 7 or 8, including Leroy Jenkins down here in the corner. He actually gives up some money for that. We're on iTunes. Please feel free to give us some feedback on iTunes if you are a user of the iTunes. I don't actually use it, but I have it at Mac, so it kind of comes with the territory. So, that was it. Thank you to Mr. Gough for setting me not false or not true. It's we got a bunch of good podcast suggestions from our people out there on our Gmail account at bds.podcast. So we have a whole list of people we'd like to have come on the podcast. And if you have an idea for a podcast and you maybe even like to come on the podcast, please feel free to hit us up on that or on our Twitters. So that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. So, Mr. Betcher, I will talk to you again very soon.
All right.
You have a great week, and everyone out there and our listener have a great week too.
Bye-bye.